play by the rules. In just 37 seconds, one comment would send shockwaves through the studio and transform what was supposed to be a lighthearted chat into the most uncomfortable moment in British television history. The lights were bright that evening in the studio. Jonathan Ross sat behind his desk, the same desk where he'd interviewed hundreds of celebrities over the years. His smile was warm and welcoming, as always. The audience buzzed with excitement. They had come to see something special. A real prince. Prince Harry, the royal everyone thought they knew, was about to sit down for what should have been a fun conversation. Jonathan stood up as Harry walked onto the stage. The audience erupted in applause. Harry waved, but his smile seemed tight. There was something in his eyes, something that suggested this was not going to go the way anyone expected. "Welcome, welcome. So good to have you here," Jonathan said, extending his hand. Harry took his hand limply, barely making eye contact. "Thanks for having me," he said, his voice flat. They sat down. Jonathan's energy was infectious, as always. He leaned forward, ready to make his guest comfortable. "So, how are you finding everything? Must be quite different from what you're used to." Harry glanced around the studio with a look that could only be described as disdain. "Yeah, it's different. Definitely not as grand as the settings I usually find myself in." The audience laughed nervously. Jonathan chuckled, trying to keep things light. "Well, we do our best here. Not quite palace standards, but we like to think we've got our own charm." Harry didn't laugh. Instead, he shifted in his seat, already looking uncomfortable. "Right," was all he said. Jonathan pressed on, determined to break the ice. "So, I've got to ask, what made you decide to come on the show? We were thrilled when we heard you wanted to join us." Harry leaned back, crossing his arms. "Well, my people said it would be good for my image. You know, connect with the common people and all that. Show them I'm relatable." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Jonathan's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "The common people? Well, I suppose that's one way to describe our wonderful audience here tonight." The audience shifted uneasily in their seats. A few people exchanged glances. This wasn't going the way anyone had hoped. Jonathan tried to steer the conversation to safer ground. "Let's talk about your recent projects. You've been involved in some wonderful charity work." Harry waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, yes, the charity stuff. It's what we do, isn't it? Noblesse oblige and all that. Someone has to help the less fortunate." Jonathan's eyebrows raised slightly. He maintained his composure, but anyone who knew him could see the frustration building. "Well, the work you do certainly makes a difference in many lives." "I should hope so," Harry said. "I mean, I give up quite a bit of my valuable time for these things. People should be grateful." The audience was completely silent now. The atmosphere had grown thick with tension. Jonathan glanced at his notes, trying to find something, anything, that might turn this around. "You mentioned your people earlier," Jonathan said carefully. "Your advisors, your team, how do they help you navigate public life?" Harry snorted. "Navigate? Please. They're there to handle the boring details while I focus on what matters. I don't need advice on how to live my life. I was born into this. I know what I'm doing." Jonathan nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "I see. And what about the people who support you? Your fans, the public who follow your work?" "What about them?" Harry asked, genuinely seeming confused by the question. "Well," Jonathan said, choosing his words carefully, "don't you think they deserve respect? They're the ones who care about what you do, who support your causes." Harry laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Respect? Jonathan, let's be honest here. They love me because of who I am. Because of my title. They don't really know me, and frankly, I don't need to know them. That's just the way it works." Jonathan's smile had completely disappeared now. His eyes were sharp, focused. "Is that really what you think? that people only care about your title. Of course, Harry said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Take away the crown, and who am I? Just another person. But I have the crown, so I'm special. That's the reality. The audience was shifting uncomfortably now. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jonathan sat back in his chair, studying his guest with a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. You know, Jonathan said slowly, I've interviewed a lot of people over the years. Actors, musicians, politicians, even other members of royalty. And I've got to say, I'm finding this conversation quite surprising. Harry shrugged. Surprising how? Because I'm being honest? Because I'm not putting on a show for everyone? No, Jonathan said, his voice firm now. Surprising because I expected better. Because the people sitting in this audience, the people watching at home, they deserve better than to be called common. They deserve better than to be treated like they're beneath you. Harry's face flushed red. Excuse me? Are you seriously lecturing me right now? Do you know who you're talking to? Yes, Jonathan said calmly. I'm talking to someone who seems to have forgotten that titles don't make you better than anyone else. Someone who's sitting in a studio full of people who took time out of their lives to come see you. And you're treating them like they're not worthy of basic respect. The audience erupted in applause. They had been silent for so long, watching this train wreck unfold, but Jonathan's words struck a chord. These were regular people, working people, people who had been called common by someone who was supposed to serve them. Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. I don't have to sit here and be spoken to like this. Not by you. Not by anyone. Jonathan remained seated, calm and collected. You're absolutely right. You don't have to sit here. But let me ask you something. What exactly did you expect? Did you think you could come on national television, insult an entire audience, dismiss the people who support you, and everyone would just smile and nod? I expected professional courtesy, Harry snapped. I expected to be treated with the respect I deserve. Jonathan stood up now, meeting Harry's glare with steady eyes. Respect is earned, not inherited. And right now, you're not showing much of it to anyone here. Harry's mouth opened and closed. He looked around the studio, at the cameras, at the audience staring at him with a mixture of shock and disapproval. For a moment, it seemed like he might say something else. But then his expression hardened. Do you have any idea what kind of life I lead? Harry said, his voice rising. The pressure, the constant scrutiny. You sit here in your little studio and judge me, but you don't know what it's like. You're right, Jonathan said quietly. I don't know what it's like to be you. But I do know what it's like to work hard for everything I have. I know what it's like to earn my place in this industry without a title to fall back on. And I know what it's like to appreciate the people who make my job possible. These people here, they're not beneath anyone. They're the reason shows like this exist. The audience applauded again, louder this time. Harry's face was crimson now, a mixture of anger and something else. Embarrassment, perhaps. Or maybe just frustration that things weren't going his way. This is absurd, Harry said. I'm not going to stand here and be humiliated. Nobody's humiliating you, Jonathan replied. You're doing that all by yourself. Every word out of your mouth since you sat down has been about how you're better than everyone else, how your time is so valuable, how we should all be grateful for your presence. Well, I've got news for you. That's not how the world works. Not here anyway. Harry pointed a finger at Jonathan. You have no right to speak to me this way. I could make one phone call and end your career. The studio went deathly quiet. That threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Jonathan didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply stared at Harry with an expression of profound disappointment. Is that so? Jonathan said softly. You're going to threaten me now? On my own show? In front of all these people? Harry seemed to realize he'd gone too far, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. I'm just stating facts. People listen to me. People with power. Jonathan shook his head slowly. You know what the saddest part of this is? You actually believe that. You actually think power and titles make you untouchable. But let me tell you something. The people who truly have power are the ones who treat others with dignity. The ones who lift people up instead of putting them down. The ones who understand that we're all just trying to get through this life together. The audience erupted again. Some people were on their feet now, applauding Jonathan's words. Harry looked around, bewildered, as if he couldn't understand why everyone was against him. This is unbelievable, Harry muttered. Absolutely unbelievable. What's unbelievable, Jonathan said, is that you came here tonight and showed your true colors. You had a chance to connect with people, to show them who you really are, beyond the headlines and the photographs. And instead, you insulted them. You talked down to them. You made it clear that you think you're better than everyone in this room. Harry's hands were shaking now. Whether from anger or nerves, it was hard to tell. I don't have to listen to this. I'm leaving. By all means, Jonathan said, gesturing toward the exit. The door's right there. But before you go, I want you to think about something. Think about all the people who look up to you. The kids who see you as a role model. The families who support the causes you claim to care about. What do you think they're going to see when they watch this? Harry stopped mid-step. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Doubt, maybe. Or the realization that this wasn't going to simply go away. But then his jaw set, and the mask of arrogance returned. They'll see exactly what I want them to see, Harry said. My people will handle this. They always do. Jonathan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your people can't spin this. Not when it's all on camera. Not when every word you've said is recorded. You walked in here thinking you could say whatever you wanted because of who you are. But the truth is, actions have consequences, even for princes. Are you threatening me now? Harry demanded. No, Jonathan said firmly. I'm just being honest. Something you claimed to value a few minutes ago. The truth is, you've shown everyone here tonight exactly who you are, and no amount of damage control is going to change that. Harry turned back toward Jonathan, his face twisted with anger. You think you're so clever, don't you? So righteous, but you're just a talk show host, a nobody who got lucky. The words hit the air like a slap. The audience gasped. Even the camera operators seemed shocked. Jonathan stood there, absorbing the insult, and when he spoke, his voice was ice cold. You know what? You're right. I'm just a talk show host. I don't have a title. I wasn't born into wealth or privilege. Everything I have, I worked for. And maybe that's why I understand something you never will. Respect isn't about where you come from or what title you carry. It's about how you treat people. And right now, you're failing spectacularly. Harry stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You're making a very big mistake right now. Jonathan didn't back down. The only mistake being made here is the one you made when you decided to come on this show and treat everyone like they're beneath you. I've had enough. This interview is over. You can't end this, Harry said. I'm the guest. It's my show, Jonathan replied calmly, and I'm asking you to leave. Now. The studio erupted. The audience was on their feet, some applauding, others simply watching in stunned silence. Harry stood there, looking from Jonathan to the crowd and back again, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. This is outrageous, Harry sputtered. You can't just kick me off your show? Watch me, Jonathan said. He turned to the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for cutting this short, but I think we've all seen enough tonight. Sometimes, the most revealing interviews are the ones that show us who people truly are. And tonight, we've certainly seen that. Harry's face went through a series of expressions. shock, anger, disbelief. He opened his mouth to say something else, but Jonathan held up a hand. "Please," Jonathan said quietly. "Just go. You've said more than enough." For a long moment, Harry didn't move. He stood there, his chest heaving, his fists clenched at his sides. The entire studio held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Would he storm off? Would he say something even worse? Would he finally realize the magnitude of what he'd done? Then, without another word, Harry turned on his heel and walked off the stage. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. The audience watched him go, some still applauding, others just staring in disbelief. The cameras followed him until he disappeared through the side door, and then they cut back to Jonathan. Jonathan stood there for a moment, collecting himself. When he spoke again, his voice was steady, but filled with emotion. "I want to say something to everyone here, and everyone watching at home," he began. "You are not common. You are not beneath anyone. Your lives matter. Your work matters. Your dreams and struggles and triumphs matter just as much as anyone else's, regardless of their title or status. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than you are." The audience erupted in the loudest applause of the night. People were cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes. Jonathan had stood up for them. He had defended them when someone with power and privilege tried to diminish them. And in that moment, he became more than just a talk show host. He became a voice for everyone who had ever been made to feel small. Jonathan waited for the applause to die down before continuing. "I've been doing this job for a long time. I've interviewed some incredible people. People who inspire and entertain and challenge us to be better. Tonight was not one of those nights, but maybe, in its own way, it was important. Because it reminded us all of something crucial. Character isn't about birth or wealth or titles. It's about how we treat each other. It's about recognizing the humanity in everyone we meet." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "I don't regret what happened here tonight. I don't regret standing up for the people in this audience, for the people watching at home, because that's what we should do. That's what matters. Not protecting the egos of people who think they're untouchable, but protecting the dignity of everyone else." The applause came again, wave after wave of it. Jonathan smiled, a genuine smile this time, and gave a small bow. "Thank you all for being here tonight, for being part of this, for reminding me why I love this job, even on nights like this. You're all wonderful. Every single one of you." As the show cut to commercial, the cameras captured one final image. Jonathan Ross, standing alone on the stage, looking out at an audience that had witnessed something unprecedented, something raw and real and completely unscripted. They had come expecting a pleasant chat with royalty. Instead, they got a masterclass in dignity, in standing up for what's right, in refusing to bow to arrogance and entitlement. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. Crew members were buzzing. Phones were ringing off the hook. Everyone knew they had just witnessed television history. Not the kind of history they had planned for. But the kind that happens when real emotions and real conflicts play out in real time. And somewhere, probably in a car speeding away from the studio, sat a prince who had learned a hard lesson. That respect cannot be demanded. That titles do not grant immunity from accountability. That when you treat people as if they're beneath you, eventually someone will stand up and remind you that no one is above common decency. What happened that night in the studio became more than just a moment of television drama. It became a symbol. A reminder that in the end, how we treat others defines us far more than any title ever could. Jonathan Ross had invited a prince onto his show, expecting a conversation. What he got instead was a chance to show the world what true leadership looks like. Not the kind that comes from birth, but the kind that comes from character, from choosing to stand up for people who cannot always stand up for themselves. The interview that was supposed to last 30 minutes ended in just over 15. 37 seconds after it began, the tone shifted. 37 seconds where a simple comment about common people revealed the chasm between expectation and reality. 37 seconds that set the stage for one of the most dramatic confrontations ever broadcast on British television. The lights in the studio eventually dimmed. The audience filed out, still talking amongst themselves, still processing what they had seen. The cameras were turned off. The microphones went silent. But the impact of that night would echo far beyond the studio walls. It would become a story told and retold. A moment when someone with everything met someone who had earned everything, and the person who had earned it refused to be intimidated. Jonathan Ross went home that night, knowing he had done the right thing. Not the easy thing, not the safe thing, but the right thing. He had looked privilege in the eye and refused to blink. He had heard arrogance and called it out. He had witnessed entitlement and shut it down. And in doing so, he had reminded everyone watching that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guy wins. Not because of titles or power or connections, but because of something far more powerful. The simple courage to stand up and say, enough is enough. After Harry had dismissed the audience as common people, and Jonathan had tried to redirect, the conversation moved to Harry's recent public appearances. "Let's talk about your recent visit to the children's hospital," Jonathan said. "That must have been rewarding." Harry waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, that. Yes, well, the photographers got some good shots. My team was pleased with the coverage." Jonathan's eyebrows shot up. "The coverage? What about the children you met?" "What about them?" Harry asked, genuinely seeming perplexed. "Well, didn't you enjoy meeting them? Didn't it mean something to you to brighten their day?" Harry shrugged. "I suppose it was nice for them. They seemed excited. But honestly, these events all blur together after a while. Shake some hands, smile for the cameras, move on to the next thing. It's just part of the job." Someone in the audience gasped audibly. Jonathan leaned forward, his voice careful but firm. "Part of the job? These are sick children we're talking about. Children who are fighting for their lives. And you're saying it's just part of the job?" Harry's face hardened. "Look, I don't have time to form emotional attachments to every person I meet. If I did that, I'd never get anything done. I show up, I do what's expected, and that's enough. They get their royal visit. I get positive press. Everyone wins." The tension in the room was now unbearable. Jonathan sat back, studying Harry with barely concealed disgust. "Everyone wins? Tell me, do you actually hear yourself right now? Do you understand what you're saying?" "I'm being honest," Harry insisted. "Isn't that what people always say they want? Honesty? Well, here it is. This is how things work in my world." "Your world," Jonathan repeated slowly. "Your world sounds like a very cold and lonely place." Harry laughed bitterly. "Cold, maybe, but it's reality. And unlike most people, I don't have the luxury of pretending otherwise. I have responsibilities, obligations. I can't just go around feeling things for every person who crosses my path." "Feeling things?" Jonathan's voice rose slightly. "You're talking about basic human compassion, like it's some kind of inconvenience, like caring about people is beneath you." "It's not beneath me," Harry snapped. "It's just not practical. You don't understand the demands on my time. Every minute is scheduled. Every appearance is planned. I can't afford to get bogged down in emotions." Jonathan shook his head in disbelief. "You know what I think? I think you're hiding behind your schedule and your obligations because it's easier than actually connecting with people. It's easier to keep everyone at arm's length and pretend you're too important to care." Harry's jaw clenched. "You don't know anything about me." "I know what you've shown me tonight," Jonathan replied. "And I've got to tell you, it's not a pretty picture. You've insulted my audience. You've reduced charity work to a photo opportunity. You've talked about sick children like they're just items on a checklist. And now you're sitting here defending it all like there's nothing wrong with any of it. The audience murmured their agreement. Harry looked around, his expression growing more defensive by the second. You're twisting my words. Am I? Jonathan asked. Because from where I'm sitting, I'm just repeating what you said. Your words, your attitude, your complete lack of regard for the people around you. Harry stood up at this point, his face flushed with anger. That's when he made his threat about ending Jonathan's career. That's when the gloves truly came off. When Jonathan finally asked Harry to leave, there was a finality to it. This wasn't a suggestion. This wasn't a request that could be negotiated. This was the host of the show, in his studio, exercising his right to protect his audience from someone who had shown nothing but contempt for them. The walk off the stage was long. Each step echoed in the silent studio. The audience watched, transfixed, all with the knowledge that they were witnessing something historic. As the door closed behind Harry, the tension finally released, and then came the applause. Thunderous, sustained, genuine applause for a man who had done something brave. The world would talk about that interview for a long time. They would analyze every word, every gesture, every moment of tension. But at its core, the story was simple. A prince came to a show expecting deference and walked away with a lesson. A host welcomed a guest